All right, so Trish and I are having a conversation today for new teachers who are joining the Inventorium, and we're going to discuss a few of the things about what it's like to become a new teacher. Now, interestingly enough, I am a relatively new teacher still with Inventorium. I've been only with the company for one term, and so far going really good. So we'll discuss some of those things. So introduce yourself, Trish.
So I'm Trish Westlake, and I've been teaching with the Inventorium for 3 terms. So I'm pretty new as well.
Awesome. So, Trish, what I might do, we'll just start with you because you're the more experienced person. So, what advice would you give when people are first starting out? What is the best advice that you could give them for starting with the company, teaching, or at least teaching through the Inventorium curriculum?
The best advice is to not stress and go straight online, familiarize yourself with the topics and work out, because the topics are given, they've got different names to the SACE equivalents. So work out what topic matches a SACE equivalent topic and just spend some time going through topic by topic, reading what is available, getting familiar with it, because once you do that, you'll realize how easy it is to actually teach it.
So one of the things, so I know for me, I'd only been teaching for, a couple of years before doing it. So I didn't have to unlearn as much. What advice would you give for teachers who have been in an existing school for a long time and might be used to doing things a certain way? What kind of advice would you give about trying it this new way?
And I think that's probably one of the other issues is, I suppose, like any work environment, it becomes and we become quite interested in owning something. So yeah, look, that is definitely a struggle with the Inventorium, but that's a little bit more of a mindset where you just believe that your job as a teacher is to create lesson plans, have ownership over everything, and then you sort of have to teach it and assess and all those other elements. Whereas with this, you don't. It is very hard to let go of that control and that ownership, which is really what it is. And I certainly found that a bit of a struggle. But again, when you sort of just start to get into it and accept it for what it is, and that is, it's an online platform which it's effectively given to you, and you spend time going through it, you can also adjust things. And that's the joy of the Inventorium. As a team environment, we are always looking to improve things. And certainly, as you know, Luke, this year, I've spent some time adjusting assessment tasks in a maths curriculum space. And I think that's the thing with open discussion, you just start to realise that there's so much already there. It becomes easier to let it go. And once you start to teach it, you actually find the curriculum actually effectively becomes yours anyway. So you end up with that sense of ownership. And once you start teaching the students, your job becomes so much about the students and one-on-one and adjusting what you do to that specific student's needs, that your sense of control and need for ownership kind of moves from lesson planning and curriculum development to actually more, student focused. So you still end up with that sense of ownership. It's just kind of in a different space and really in a more useful space.
One of the things I've found as well is just doing one particular class at a time has helped to start out. And because it's more student-centered, the student is the one who is in charge of exploring, and then we just kind of help along. That's kind of, how I've looked at it. So we know with PLP is a good starter. We know the particular modules for that, and that's great. And for me, I thought, I was a bit intimidated because I'm supposed to be doing a research project and these classes that I'd never taught before. But when you see the student-centered aspect of it, you can really find out what motivates them. PLP really brings out what motivates them, and then we can, hopefully steer them along a bit. And you're always going to get a few hiccups, aren't you? And the students that probably won't do a lot of learning in traditional school might struggle a little bit, but then others might smash through it a lot quicker. And instead of waiting for the rest of the class, they're gonna go ahead, and they're the ones that I've found equally as challenging. But I've just kind of looked at it as a learning process myself, instead of thinking of being a subject area teacher and having to have it all perfect and laid out. Just relaxing a bit and just going for a ride with the student. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think that's the other thing. I know when I started, there was a sense of panic, because suddenly you're meant to be across this curriculum that you haven't designed. You're meant to be across assessment tasks you've had no actual sort of initial input into. You're dealing with students one on one, which is, I think, quite different to dealing with a whole class, because there's a different expectation from a student. You end up with a different type of relationship, I think. Um, and look, yeah, and look, getting across multiple topics and feeling like you had to know everything certainly I felt a lot of pressure. It's definitely easier teaching sort of one topic at a time and learning it with your students. But the thing that I found, and look, I think I've found that every time that I've taught, is I just have such high expectations, that the students are just going to, plow through things. And I tend to forget that, that's just not the reality. And I also expect, I suppose the kids are meant to look at me, as some sort of professor, a bit of a know-it-all. And the reality is, kids are happy to kick back and relax. They often are happier if you just actually learn with them. So in the end, when I sort of took that pressure off myself and spent the quality time with the kids and talked to them and just appreciated that, we were on an equal footing, and actually sort of said to them a couple of times, they was in a few occasions ahead of me. And when I sort of just said to them, look, you guys are ahead of me, wait for me to catch up, or let's do this together, it actually increased, it really helped with the relationship with the students. But yeah, you don't have to get across everything either. The kids are really flexible. And again, you just realize that, yeah, you can catch up to the kids. So some kids who are further ahead, you just ask them where they are. And most of them don't even need help. There is so much on the Inventorium, and it's easy for them to digest, that I just often found that the kids just didn't even need that help. But the other thing is, and I don't know if you found this, Luke, every single child has a backstory and has a history. And, that does mean that, each time you're with them, or even whatever topic you're choosing, you have to restructure and reframe things based on that student. And that slows things down sometimes and makes it a lot easier as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things as well is working with the Inventorium is this curriculum is already set, but there is also flexibility for us to put in our ideas and that sort of thing, and doing a bit of cross-pollinating. So I know for me, research project was a bit daunting. I've actually thoroughly enjoyed learning it with my students, but at the same time, if there's some extra help I've got Eddie there, or you, and so or I'm more creative. So I use Photoshop and all that sort of stuff. So if one of you guys wants help with that, yeah, I can help teach your student. So it's more, it's been a good experience, just being able to think, all right, I'm not going to have a perfectionist mentality. I'm just going to dive in, try it out, and so far it's just been fantastic. And I've had some students who, have been similar, who have been a little bit daunted, or it's not lining up with their interests, so they've become maybe a little bit disengaged. And so you can step back for a little bit, take a bit of a mentor role, and just sort of say, all right, well, what would motivate you? So how can we change this? So if you have a particular interest, how can we incorporate that a little more? Or what's a movie you really like? Let's go through that. So it definitely helps having the pre-existing teaching experience, but just looking at it as a new way of doing things. And a lot of these kids might not even be engaged with school at all. So it's, so that's how it's a load off your plate when you realize that, we're just experimenting with education together, but at the same time, hopefully they have a lifelong love of learning, because now hopefully most of the subjects will be lined up with what they're interested in. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you touched on, I suppose, what we've talked about numerous times, and I think that's something as well for new teachers to adjust to is the team environment that is the Inventorium. And for me, that was something quite unique to come into because we're all very used to work environments where we kind of stick to ourselves. You don't want to show someone your insecurities or sometimes people aren't particularly helpful, and that kind of creates a bit of an isolation. But one thing, and I've certainly learned it, is that's not what the Inventorium is. It's very much a team environment. Eddie's incredibly helpful, and exactly like you're saying, we're all starting to discover our own strengths and willing, more than willing, to offer each other, assistance. But look, you're spot on, and that's the other thing. It's because it's so student focused. And I know with my students, if they're struggling or there's a personal issue or something that's interfering with their learning, you just have so much flexibility to move around subjects and, just really streamline it to the child's interests. I think one of the key things to making it successful is just being honest with the students and honest with the parents. And I've found that blunt honesty of even just, openly saying, look, I'm not 100% sure what we're going to do or how we're going to do it, or, you know, has been, accepted quite well by the children and by their parents. And then again, there's just such a team spirit to the whole thing, that has just also massively reduced the stress. And I think that's one of the real big benefits of this system.
Yeah. So technology is probably another area that some teachers might not be as confident with. So I know for myself, I love technology, and even now we're having to, because of the COVID-19, having to have a conversation over the internet, but we're already set up with that. I personally thrive on the challenge of it, but what advice would you give for a teacher that's not as confident with the tech side?
Feel free to email me because dead set, I I had to learn Zoom. Yesterday was my very first introduction, I think, to the MS Teams. So yeah, I'm Luke. You and I, we're very different on that. I'm so not tech savvy, but again, I enjoy learning anything that's sort of technological. And to be honest, it's actually been surprisingly easy. And to make the inventorium work, it's just not that hard. And again, that team thing, I really am enjoying learning from you and learning from some other of the other members of the inventorium team. That's sort of uplifting all of our skills. So look, if you're a new teacher and you're worried about technology, do not be, because to make the inventorium work, it is incredibly easy. And again, everybody who's part of the inventorium team is more than happy to help everybody out. You never have to feel stupid about any question, because I'm pretty sure most of us have had those questions before.
Yeah, awesome. Probably the last thing for me I would suggest as well is uh, making sure that the students back up their work. And for me, I use Google Drive, so I have them back up into a Google Doc for each module they're doing on the Inventorium site. And that way I can go through it really quickly, all in one hit. So, and they've got it backed up. So if something goes wrong, or a site crashes, or they lose their work from their computer, they've got it all backed up there online so that it's, yeah, nice and safe. And that's a process I've been using. And do you do something similar, or?
Look, I have a few students who are scared of technology. They don't know how to use it. So even getting an email address was something really new to them. So you kind of have to weigh up, what the student's capable of and what they know. And for them, coming to the inventorium has been a massive learning curve. So at the moment, I have been relying primarily on the students uploading their work to the inventorium portfolio, and also directly emailing me. Now I then have files on my computer where I save their work, and I expect all my students to obviously have files on their own computers where they save their work as well. I think it's a real individual thing. You just have to work out what works for you. And at this point in time, that's worked successfully, for the students that I currently have.
So, and I think that's a good point, that the same way it's, very student centered in the approach of the site, but it's also for us individually centered as well, isn't it? So we all have our strengths and challenges, not weaknesses. And, so we can, tailor it. Yeah. So tailor it a little bit more to how we do it, and that's fine, isn't it? So, yeah. Any other advice you want to give? There's not much else. Again, I said I'm still fairly new, but is there any other advice that you would give to someone who's just starting out?
Look, I think probably the key advice is just to ask questions from the fellow team members. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to sound stupid because, like I said, we've all had them. And I think everyone in the team is more than willing to help. And if you get that help, it just reduces the initial stress. You progress a lot quicker. But look, it's one of those things that you sit there and you kind of feel overwhelmed. And I think because you just feel like you're meant to be overwhelmed by anything that's new. And when you actually start to play around with it, ask questions and all the rest of it, you just kind of discover that it's actually just incredibly easy to utilize and really works well. And look, I must admit, by the time I'd taught for 4 weeks, I was starting to feel really comfortable with it. And, by the time I came into this year, I was feeling incredibly comfortable, even to the point where, look, teaching, and I now, last year I was teaching primarily, PLP, whereas this year I'm teaching quite a few topics, and that's been incredibly unstressful. I'm not, like, I thought it would be more stressful, but because I'm so familiar with it and I've got so much confidence in the process now, and there's that support, it's just feels like home. It really is just easy to do now. So just give it a go, Masley, without being scared.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think that's covered a lot. So thanks, Trish, and join me again soon for another video.
Thanks.